Hello everyone. I hope you've already viewed part 1 of this two-part set of recordings. Part 1 was recorded on March 19th, 2023. This is part 2 being recorded March 25th, 2023 about 1 p.m. Parts 1 and 2 show a simulation of a hypothetical estate plan drafting project for an imaginary client named Mary Chilton. All other names are fictional, however, my name is W. Thomas Wheeler. I am the narrator. Part 1 was the interview session. Part 2 is the finishing session. The goal of part 2 is to manually transform a raw but pretty darn good first draft into a usable, printable, signable set of documents. I hope you have the time or make the time to watch this entire video to the end. If you have any questions, my contact information appears here, also will appear again at the end of this video. Okay, here we go. This is the last screen that you saw from part 1, the first of the two-part set of videos. I'm going to click the Finish button, and I see an hourglass. At least on the platform on which I am running this model, it may take 30 seconds to assemble the document by merging my answers with the template. So here you see the assembled raw document, and first thing you do is a save as and save this entire document as raw. It's the original product from this system. And after I've saved that into a Mary Chilton folder on my computer, I want to do another save as, naming it after myself or Tom's edit of the Mary Chilton document set, and that's the one that I would work on. The raw one would simply be an archive version of the first things that were downloaded. So here you see, for example, I have created a Mary Chilton March 2023 folder, and I have saved the document set as Mary Chilton's raw document set. In that same folder, I have done another save as, naming it as above here, Mary Chilton's Tom's edit of document set. Then this instruction on the first page says keep on scrolling down to see your first draft. Each person has their own style for editing and polishing the finished documents. There are a few tricks. Up high is a highlighter icon, turn on off highlight. If I click on a highlighted text and then click on the highlighter, it de-highlights the text. And if I select some text and click on that highlighter, it highlights the text. Again, highlight, de-highlight. That's pretty easy. Also, you may notice there are these little paragraph end symbols visible, and you may notice, if you look closely, that there are little dots between each word. If you leave those on, they are visible only to you, but they will not be printed as part of the final draft. And you may notice there's a view menu up high. If you want to view those paragraph symbols, I have clicked it here, and if I unclick it, notice that takes away those little dots, and that takes away the paragraph symbols. When I am editing, I prefer to view those helpful paragraph symbols that also show me a blank line here between the name Wheeler and the next that says number 1, first do a save as. Just a little tip that might come in handy for you. There are some other tips. I'll probably just mention them as I use them. So I'm going to scroll down quite a ways. Many pages I'm going to skip, dragging this scroll bar down, 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 down till I find the will. Here I have found the will. It's on line 512. Oh, by the way, I'm going to go back up. Go to the very next page, and this is page 2 of your document set, and it has line numbering starting here. Let's talk about line numbering for a second. Line numbering is very helpful when you're trying to identify, locate, and make note of any particular line number in the document set, where there might be an issue or an idea for editing that may arise during your editing. They're in here for convenience only, and to easily remove line numbering, it's pretty simple. You go up to Format, Line Numbering, and turn off line numbering by clicking this box. And I'll show you if I click it now and click OK. Now line numbering doesn't exist, and if I want to put line numbering as a tool for me to reappear, Format, Line Numbering, turn it on. You don't want to have a check mark in this box that says restart numbering on each page, because then it won't help you very much if you have a multi-page document. So I'm going to leave line numbering on. I'm going down to line 512. That's the beginning of the Mary Chilton will that I'm going to review and clean up. So I'll begin. And you can do it differently. I'm sure you will. I'm going to remove this unnecessary line at 531 by putting the cursor to the left of the paragraph symbol and pushing delete. I notice there's not a line between Article 1 and 2, so I'm going to position the cursor at the end of Article 1 and push the Enter button. Now I've added a line. That looks good to me. I notice there's a page break needed here. Article 3 is dangling, separated from its text, so I'm going to go to Insert, New Page. That basically created a page break. And on the top of page 2, I don't like that first line that's blank. I'm going to put my cursor there at line 552 and push delete. Now I'm going to go back and look at page 1, and I notice that there's a lot of white space here above the lower margin line. So to make that look a little more balanced, I'm just going to add a couple spaces here. Okay, that looks like a good page 1. And remember, this line numbering will disappear. You won't see that in the printed document. And all these paragraph symbols will disappear. And I'll show you again. When you click View, Hide, Show Paragraphs, it cleaned it up. And this is what the printed version of page 1 will look like. I went a little bit too far here. So let's learn another trick. It's called Reveal Codes. Notice that when I put a page break in here, suddenly page 2 is blank and the text that used to be on page 2 is over on page 3. That tells me that between line 555 and 556 there is a page break that might be called a soft page break, probably caused by the system. So to find out what's going on here with that page break, I'm going to View, Reveal Codes. That opened up a window at the bottom of the screen. My cursor is where this red line is. And I see a hard return soft page and a hard page. Basically, I can now remove that hard page by grabbing it, dragging it off the screen, and now it's gone. I had inserted that hard page before I drove the text down. So whenever you have an issue like that with a sudden blank page, if you reveal codes and look for the code that you want to remove, that's very helpful. Now I'm going to no longer reveal codes. Article 3 has highlighted some yellow text, so I'm going to de-highlight it by clicking in there and click the highlighter symbol. That looks good. The text looks good. And I happen to remember that Mary Chilton's trust originally had Mary E. Chilton, but in the restatement we're renaming it Mary Chilton Revocable Trust Agreement. We'll see that. That's okay. The pour-over clause looks good. If she were to revoke her trust, the balance of her probate estate shall be administered in accordance with the provisions of the trust agreement dated this date and as hereafter amended. Waiver of court jurisdiction looks good. Oh, by the way, I'm going to view paragraph symbols because it's helpful to spot extra line. Here's an extra line. I'm going to delete the rest of Article 4 to Article 5. Looks good. There's only one line between. GST election. I'm going to insert a page break. Insert new page. This is, you might say, clerical stuff, but it helps your documents look better. Article 7. Article 8, Article 9, Person Representatives, looks good. Page number 3, the footer looks good. Real property. Normal language. There's an extra space above Article 11, easy to remove. This outlining looks good. Right here, you have to be a little careful. Notice that it thinks it's 7 printed pages. The raw version is 7 printed pages. I remove some language that we don't need, such as this. So by selecting that language and pushing delete, the language is gone. So we want to be sure it is a 7-page will because it's this page and the following page. So now we have a 7-page will that includes the following page, page 6, and the following page. So that looks okay. And we can push her signature line down by adding a line. We can add a line here, but clicking enter, and after witness clicking enter. And again, I'll remind you that this line numbering won't appear in the printed documents. We're done with the will review. The self-proved will certificate is not numbered and it does not have a footer. It's not considered a part of the will. It's an attachment to the will. It's optional but highly recommended. That looks good. This page, I'd say, serves a purpose. Do not delete that page. It has to do with the outline formatting in the trust agreement that's coming up. Here's the beginning of the restatement of trust. We don't need this. I'm going to delete that. This looks good to me. Mary Chilton, formerly known as Mary E. Chilton, entered into the Mary E. Chilton Revocable Trust Agreement. We are renaming it now the Mary Chilton Revocable Trust Agreement dated December 22nd, 2009, as amended and restated. This is the preamble to the restatement. It looks good. Article 1 probably should be on the next page, so a couple ways to do that. I could drive down the caption, even one more. That did it, and so that's a soft page break, so-called, not a hard page break. That looks good. Article 2, pretty standard. Article 3. Here on line 995, I would add a line by putting the cursor there and clicking enter. Notice it created a small VII outline because it was inside an outline code, and I'm going to back over that with a backspace, and that made it go away. Care of children, because we have a minor child, looks good. Article 4 looks good. Page break looks good. I need to de-highlight this part. There's an extra line right here. It's gone. In this Article 5, the specific distributions to individuals, one could go up higher, and I can put a line between them and backspace over that outlining. Here are 2 lines before single trust, so I'm going to delete one. I'm going to de-highlight single trust. Here's a line that has an outline attached to it, small Roman numeral V. Now it's gone. Division into separate shares, continuation of separate trust shares, bottom of page 8, residential sweetener on the bottom of page 8, business and wedding sweeteners. The lines look good. Extra lines I can delete. After the death of a child, general power of appointment, limited power of appointment, share for issue of deceased child, continues in trust until age 35, sprinkling, so forth, ultimate contingent beneficiaries, heirs at law. Article 7, the purpose that Mary had to have a spendthrift trust, it's mentioned in here, and you probably want to discuss with Mary the advantages of having creditor protection, or confirm with her the provisions of the Minnesota statute that strengthen creditor proofness, if that is a word. There's a little bit of highlighting right here, and to get rid of it, I'm going to make it all highlighted and then make it all de-highlighted. De-highlight this. Okay, now we're at the bottom of page 11. There's some extra lines here. I can push delete, delete, delete. A little warning to verify something. This is a definition of issue, waiver of court jurisdiction, discretionary termination. You can edit all of this. Here again on line 1367, regarding subchapter S stock, there are a few different variations of language that can be used with subchapter S stock. So take a look at the Minnesota CLE Drafting Wills and Trust Agreements book and incorporate the language in there. Add it here in lieu of this proposed language and adapt it as you see fit if you deem it necessary. Captions are for convenience only. Here's a unique sort of custom drafted thing, duty to inform. In reaction to the Minnesota statute section 501C.0813, this is an attempt to not have account statements go everywhere. If you have a child who's administering a trust share for another child or descendants of Mary, we want to relieve them of the burden of sending accountings on a regular basis to grandchildren, for example. That was an unforeseen consequence of the new statute. Adapt this language, duty to inform, as you see fit. Article 13, trustees' powers. I deleted a line that separated paragraph 17 from paragraph 18. Having done that means that if I make an adjustment earlier in the document, then this paragraph 17 might be not separated from 18 by a line if the page breaks change. There's always a need to do one final review before printing. We want to go slow on this one. Article 13, trustee succession. Judith Winslow and Mary Packard, otherwise Andrew Winslow. There are 3 lines here. After the creation of the separate trust shares, each child can elect to become sole trustee of his or her share, appoint and remove trustees, appoint and remove other trustees for their issue, elect to become a trustee for a sibling's trust share, elect to become a trustee of a trust share, resignation, vacancies filled by the court. This looks all pretty good. I don't see unanswered variables. So that the drafted by is on page 27 and the notary acknowledgement is on 27, line 1916, and then the bottom of page 27 with the footer, Mary E. Chilton Trust Restatement. Schedule A, I will put the cursor there to delete this extra line. There's a dot between the word first and restatement. I eliminated that. The rest of this page looks fine. Page 28. Here's the power of attorney. Extra line, I can delete that. Attorney in fact, successor attorney in fact. Other lawyers will do it differently. In my practice, I pre-check A through M because those are defined by the statute. I tend not to pre-check N or recommend it because I don't know what all other matters means. It's rather broad. Essentially, I pre-check those items that I think are wise to pre-check. The power of attorney shall continue to be effective if I become incapacitated. I do not authorize my attorneys, in fact, to make gifts to themselves. I do not require them to render an accounting. As a general rule. The specimen signatures, it's kind of nice to get them on the same line, and here we have only 2 nominated attorneys in fact, so their specimen signatures appear nicely on page 3. Page 3 has a numbered page and a footer. Page 2 has no footer. There's probably a suppress footer code here, so I'm going to go format, page, suppress, and there it is. I'm going to unsuppress the footer. There's the footer. It appeared. So I'll repeat that. Format, page, suppress. Suppress the footer if you want to check that, or unsuppress the footer if you leave it unchecked. And now we have a footer on page 2 and on page 3. The adding of that footer here caused this language on line 2051 to appear on page 3 at the top, and that in turn caused the so-called specimen signature language to appear on 2091 instead of on page 3. It's on page 4, and I want this to be on page 3. So I'm just going to remove some line spacing here, and it will probably jump. There it jumped with the single line space. I could also drag down and drag up these lower margins or an upper margin. If I were to do that, it would affect all the documents that are following, so you want to be careful, but dragging and dropping the margins is kind of a handy feature of this particular software. I'm going to delete this extra blank line. The notice to principal fits nicely on page 4 where the initials are called for. You want your client to put their initials there. The notice to attorneys in fact fits on page 5 with the footer and the drafted by. So that looks good. The common law power of attorney, name is Judith Winslow, otherwise Mary Packard. And this is old language from the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s. You can customize it to suit you, and take a look at the Minnesota Continuing Legal Education, drafting wills and trust agreements for any specimen form of common law power of attorney. In general, this is intended to be helpful in case Mary were to acquire some real estate outside the state of Minnesota, and she would then have something more than the mere Minnesota statutory short form. Here's an authorization to share information, line 2346, where Judith Winslow can send and receive information. For some reason this is not centered, so I'm going to select it and go up here to this tiny icon, holds down, and I'm going to say center that. Now it's centered. The rest of this is full justification, I guess you would say. Those are the only 2 authorizations that Mary wanted to give. Scrolling down, here's the healthcare directive. Looks good. She appointed all her children, or the one or more of them reasonably available, to serve. With that many children, there's little need for an alternate. Non-liability and immunity. The pre-answered questions, call them the statutory questions that are in the Minnesota statute model form. In my experience, very few people sit down and answer these questions. Don't even want to think about it, actually. So very few people have rejected these pre-answered questions. In fact, I can think none have. If a doctor is desired, type in the name of the doctor or the hospital or the care facility. But this model alerts you to the fact that it's intentionally blank, unless you've filled in an answer. This is sort of customized. Some people have strong feelings about organ donation, in which case I would encourage them to sign a direction so their family members don't struggle with what they would want. Other people who don't have strong feelings might simply authorize the healthcare agent to make the decisions in their discretion. But they may limit it to organ and tissue donation, or they may opt for research purposes. Sometimes those are strong feelings people have, and sometimes they're not so strong. Cremation and burial, place to sign. That document looks good to me. A couple blank pages. This tangible personal property list, you can always copy and paste more lines in here if you think that there are too few lines, but in general it's editable, and at the bottom it just says can be used for items of tangible personal property except money, coin collections, and property used in a trade or business. It references the newer Minnesota statute. I'm going to unhighlight these. Bill of sale, usually there are no issues to that. It does refer to her trust as restated. Designation of guardian. For guardian of the person, Mary named all her children on her healthcare directive as healthcare agents, or the one or more of them reasonably available. And on her power of attorney, however, she named first Judith Winslow and then Mary Packard. So it would be normal that conservator of the estate parallels the power of attorney document, and guardian of the person parallels the healthcare directive document, and that's what this does here. Other language you can customize, delete, or leave it in. A memo on real estate. Mary has a home. We made some imaginary notes of some imaginary real estate. This is an internal document, just for your records. You can print that or not print it, but if you learned a little bit about, for example, the property ID number, or that it was Torrens, or other information like that, you could add other information when you go through the interview, or type some other information right here if it's not in the memo already. Here's a proposed Schedule A that just has the legal description, but it also has the so-called nickname. Okay. Quitclaim deed. I've always used quitclaim deeds. And the system is limited to Minnesota real estate. We're not intending to try to create Wisconsin deeds or Arizona deeds or Florida deeds or any other deeds from any other state. Nomination of successor custodian. Because Mary had a minor child, there was a fairly good chance that there might be a Uniform Transfers to Minors Act account in place for the benefit of her minor child, in which Mary may or may not have nominated a successor custodian. So the successors by default in here are the two nominees who had been named in the will to be testamentary guardian number 1 and testamentary guardian number 2 for the minor child. I'll de-highlight that. If you were to print it with highlighting in place like this, it would end up looking gray. So before you print, you always want to de-highlight everything. Here is a draft of a letter of instruction thanking Mary for letting you help her, and recommending that now that her bill of sale has transferred tangible property to her trust and her deed conveying real estate to her trust, it's recommended that she name as additional insured her trust, but keep herself insured on her auto insurance, or property casualty insurance, and homeowner's insurance. So that's just recommended. It helps the surviving trustees to collect homeowner's insurance in case there's a house fire, for example. The estate tax environment is simply confirmed here, federal and Minnesota. Retitling bank accounts, some information about 2 different ways to change a bank account to either become owned by the trust or be made payable on death to the trust, as amended and restated, or the successor trustee, and investment accounts, LLC, and so forth. Same idea. You can either have those properties owned by the trust or made transfer on death to the trust. Changing beneficiaries on life insurance. Primary beneficiary normally would be the trust if it's not already her old trust. You want to double check that, or she wants to double check by getting a screenshot of the record on file with the insurance company. With respect to retirement accounts, just a question. Should it be her adult children in equal share? Should it be all her children? The required minimum distribution language is going to be in the trust agreement. You can compare that to the Minnesota CLE language, the 10-year rule, and so forth. In some cases, a default beneficiary might be her trust, but I think the children, all 6 of them probably, would be normal. You can discuss that with Mary. Certificate of trust, a specimen form, looks as expected. An invoice. Okay. If you want an invoice to be prepared, let's just assume that you had discussed in advance some fee for whatever hourly rate you use and however many meetings you had and so forth. There's a bill in there that you could present. And then this can be used, printed, and used as a spine on a notebook. I'm going to go up top. I think this might be the last. Yeah. Thank you for using the drafting interview, but I'll go up and notice this is line 3361, but I'll go up near the top of this document set and show you a couple of things that we skipped over. Here's a potential table of contents that if it's cleaned up, if it has no line numbering, you could print this and it would suffice as a table of contents for a 3-ring binder, a notebook, if Mary would appreciate that kind of a method of keeping her documents. Below that is a potential outside cover page of a notebook, those types of notebooks that have transparent plastic sleeves on the outside of the front of a notebook. Going back up to page 2. This is page 2 of the document set, and here's where line numbering started. And I remind you that if you want to remove line numbering, you can do Format, Line, Numbering, turn it off, and say OK, or leave it on, and then just cancel the change. I will show you a few other things here that we skipped over. There's a sort of a summary between lines 25 and 32 of who are the trustees, a logo, more information from the publisher, some instructions on how to navigate your way through this word processing system. You might or might not want to print this once and study it carefully if you're having trouble with navigating the editing process. Some terminology, drafting interview, answer set, document set to get familiar with this. It's a digital file. It would be helpful if you study this at least once. For first-time users, it's a README starting on line 172 and it goes to line 335. A summary of documents that are coming up in the order of their appearance on line 352, formatting. But the will starts on line 516. So I'm going to go back up to the top and remove the line numbering. Up we go to page 2 where it starts. Put my cursor there. Put format, line, numbering, turn it off. Okay. So all these documents, starting with the will, do not have line numbering. And if you want to see what you will get from the printer, I'll remind you to go to View, Show, Hide, Paragraph Symbols. To display or hide symbols for space, hard return, tab, etc., click this. And for example, this is a tab symbol. This is a return symbol. And the dots between each word are to let you know there's a single space bar between those words. So if I click this, and it makes them go away. I showed you how to remove the line numbering, how to remove extra lines, how to backspace over outline symbols that don't belong, and you always want to go over and over before printing. Remind you to leave that extra page. There's the restatement. Still, I think it's a pretty darn good first draft, and it doesn't take a whole lot to polish it with page breaks and spacing and custom drafting to the extent you need to. It's a pretty good start on a will and a trust restatement. Pretty nearly convinced that it's okay to print this. And of course you can print the whole thing, once, twice, 3 times if you want, but usually it's best to select. And here's another little trick. Let's say I just want to print the power of attorney form, and I position my cursor to the left of the word statutory, and I hold down the function key. It's FN usually on your keyboard. Hold that down and press F8. That locks the cursor at that position, and now I can use the right arrow or the down arrow and go down. I'm holding the down arrow down. And now I can stop and go back up arrow and down arrow. And if I want to see whether I captured the this box, the drafted by box, I can reveal codes by View, Reveal Codes. And down here is where my cursor is. And you see the little red rectangle? To the left there's a square that says box. Then there's my cursor is the red rectangle on a hard page. So my cursor is, if I could say, below the box. So if I were to click print right now, this box will print. my cursor to be just before the page break. And so I position it after legal advice. And if you think of this box as sort of like a footer, it's a different document entirely, but it's called into this document. So after legal advice with a period, my cursor is to the right, and now there's a hard return, and I'm going to use my right arrow, and there's the box code followed by a hard page code. Now my cursor is where I want it. I'm to the right of the box and to the left of the hard page. And even though you can't tell because this cursor is not moving, my cursor is really down here. I could move the cursor using my arrows, or I could click back on this page, but right now in reveal codes mode, I can precisely know whether I have my cursor to the right of this box or to the left of the box. If the cursor is to the right of the box will print. If it's to the left of the box will not print. And again, to reveal codes or stop revealing codes, view, reveal codes, boom. View, reveal codes. Notice that even though my cursor went up there and clicked on the menu, the cursor on the document stayed where it was. View, reveal codes. Now they're gone. View, reveal codes. Now I've got precision control of my cursor's position. And I'll remind you also that at the beginning of this power of attorney, I told you how to be sure that you have your cursor to the left of the first character in the document. Hold down function, hold that button down, and press F8 and let go of both. And that locks your cursor, and you can move right, and you can move down, and you can go to the end of any one of these documents that you want to print, and you can precisely position the end of the document that you want to print. And just so happens that I got lucky. My cursor is to the right of the box and to the left of the hard page. Okay, go back to view, reveal codes, and if I were to click print, and in this case, here's my print icon, I could click that, then this would print. And I can print it to a PDF if I want, and it'll be a PDF digital document, which I can name and save and upload, attach to an email, send to my client or send to somebody else. So this word processing, WordPerfect version 9, it has a lot of features, and it can either print to the printer or it can print it to a PDF. It says publish to PDF. And here's the save button. And after I've done editing my document, and I'm going to go also view, show my tabs and so forth. Now I'm going to save it. And right now it's Mary Chilton's Tom's edit of document set.wpd, but there's no words up here. But see where I'm waving the cursor? The words unmodified will appear. As soon as I save it, I'm going to click on it. Now I click save. Now watch, the word unmodified just appeared. That means that this document as edited has been saved manually by me to my hard disk, and it was probably being auto-saved all along the way in case I had a power failure or something. But saving it manually is a good idea, especially if you're doing heavy custom drafting and like what you've done and don't want to lose what you've done. Save manually often, I would say, just to be safe. And the word unmodified is helpful because it gives you the reassurance that if your computer gets a loss of power, your document will be still residing safely intact in your long-term memory. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this demonstration of the drafting system. You have my contact information if you have any questions, and I wish you all the luck with your estate plan drafting practice. So please contact me if you have any questions about this drafting system. If you have questions or comments on the Chilton videos, Part 1 and Part 2, please call Tom Wheeler at 612-296-3398. Thank you and have a wonderful estate planning practice.